Hello! Let's talk about gray hair, what it is, and how to work with it. When we see gray hair of the client, in fact, we have two types of hair. The first one has a natural pigment, and the second one is partially or completely missing it. Our aim is to make all the hair have the same color. It's Alexandre Mousselan here with you today. Let's get started.
Basically, gray hair can either be scattered throughout all the head or located in separate parts. Therefore, there are two types of gray hair, patchy and diffuse.
The patchy type means separate sections of gray hair, where its amount can reach up to 100%, for example, in temporal area.
The diffuse type means that grayness is scattered throughout the entire head, and it's determined in percentage.
To determine the percentage of gray hair, we need to count 10 hairs on the most grizzled part of the head. If 1 hair out of 10 is gray, such grayness all over the head will be considered to be 10%. If 2, then 20. If 3, then 30, and so on.
There are 5 degrees of grayness. The first degree is a very light gray in the temple and nape areas. The main hair mass has its natural color, though slightly faded. The second degree is 25% of grayness. Gray hair is visible in most parts of the head, but it does not intensely blend in. The third degree is 50% of grayness. Gray hair is clearly visible. The fourth degree is 75% of grayness. It takes a major area of hair. The fifth degree is 100% of grayness. The natural pigment is completely absent.
Thus, from the hairstyling viewpoint, we have two types of hair with different exposed contributing pigments. The first type has natural pigments. Its exposed contributing pigment depends on the hair tone depth level. The second type is without natural pigments, and correspondingly, it has no exposed contributing pigment.
Unfortunately, not all dyes are able to cover 100% of background. And quite often, we can notice the glimmering grayness on the background of the colored hair, especially after the first washing.
What can we offer to create a solid, fast color? Application of natural colors, preliminary pigmentation, hair dye consolidation, and loosening of the scaly layer, the cuticle. Gray hair has no pigment in contrast to the natural one. That's why the cosmetic pigment of the natural scale does not harm to melanin, but compensates the deficit of missing natural pigments in gray hair.
You can imbue the hair with pigment previously before coloring. It will still not affect the melanin, but fill the empty gray hair with a pigment.
By putting more dye than the oxidant into the mixture, will tighten the colorant, thus making the dye not sensitive towards the background color.
And finally, the fourth method. If you open the hair scales wider, it will improve the penetration of color pigments into the center of cortex. Gray hair will be filled more with a cosmetic pigment, providing color fastness. Moreover, the normal hair will absorb less dye because of a smaller porosity.
Let's consider all these methods in practice. The application of natural colors. In general, gray hair coloring algorithm does not differ from the usual one. The coloring is performed according to all the rules, but based on 6% oxidizer, and the soak time is 40 minutes. The first case, original color, natural base is 5.1, cosmetic base is 6.14, grayness is 50%, desired color 6.14. Let's start. Remember that in order to cover the diffuse grayness, we have to take the colorants of natural shades such as golden, natural, ash, or brown tones. Let's create the coloring cocktail. For coloring hair roots, we take the colorant 6.14 and 6% oxidizer in 1:1 or 1:1.5 proportion, depending on the mixing rules of the main palette of a brand. The soak time makes up 40 minutes. After that, in order to tone the hair along the length, we have to apply the 6.14 colorant with 1.5 or 3% oxidizer in the ratio of 1:2 and keep it for 15 to 20 minutes. Every experienced stylist faces a situation when shortly after gray hair appears, clients want to have a color that is a couple of tones lighter than the natural one and includes some stylish color nuance.
Even if you dye the hair in reflective tones, it should be saturated with the pigments of natural shades.
Please note that reflective colorants are initially focused on coloring of the hair without grayness or with the proportion of gray hair up to 25%.
Copper, red, and purple shades refer to reflective colors. They contain quite a little of base tone and a lot of coloring pigment. To dye gray hair into these shades, it's important to add natural tone to the reflective tone so that their tone depth should coincide. The amount of natural and reflective tones in the mixture depends on the percentage of grayness.
Attention! When we add natural pigments to the reflective tone, the color correspondingly loses its saturation, proportionally to the amount of natural pigments added to the mixture. The saturation loss is compensated by adding the corrector. The mixing proportions are given in the table. The second case, original color, natural base is 6.0, cosmetic base is 7.4, grayness is 50%, desired color 7.4.
Let's mix the coloring cocktail using our table.
For coloring of the roots, we take 15 grams of the natural 7.0 color plus 15 grams of the desired 7.4 color plus 5 centimeters of corrector plus 45 grams of 6% oxidizer. The proportion is 1:1 or 1:1.5, depending on the mixing rules of the main palette of a brand. The soak time makes up 40 minutes. We are toning the hair along the length using 7.4 color mixed with 1.5 or 3% oxidizer in the ratio of 1:2 and keep it for 15 to 20 minutes. Let's turn to the second method of working with gray hair, which is the preliminary pigmentation. The pigmentation of gray hair is used in order to saturate the hair with an artificial pigment and create an alternative to the lacking melanin. Therefore, the pigmentation can be applied not only to patchy gray hair where the areas of hair are 100% gray, but also to diffuse grayness when the hair has a vitreous structure. Working with gray hair is called pre-pigmentation, and there are several ways of its accomplishment. Let's consider the example of traditional pigmentation. The colorant is applied to the gray hair areas in its pure form and left for 15 to 20 minutes. On the expiry of this time, the colorant should be removed by a disposable towel, and we can proceed to the hair coloring.
For pre-pigmentation of gray hair, we have to use the colorant that is one tone lighter than the desired one. The expectations are the 9th and 10th levels. For dyeing into these colors, we use the colorant that is one tone darker than the desired one.
If your client has a sensitive scalp, then while pre-pigmentation, it is required to mix the colorant with water, apply it to gray areas, leave it for 20 minutes, and start coloring without washing it away. The third case. Original color. Natural base is 5.0. Cosmetic base is 6.3. Grayness is 80% plus sensitive scalp. Desired color, 6.3. Let's start creating the coloring cocktail, focusing on our pigmentation table. We take the color that is one tone lighter than the desired, which is 7.3, and mix it with the water in the ratio of 1:1. The soak time makes up 20 minutes. After this, the mixture should be pulled off. Afterwards, we should apply the 6.3 colorant with a 6% oxidizer in the ratio of 1:1 or 1:1.5 to the hair roots. The soak time makes up 40 minutes. We are toning the hair along the entire length using the 6.3 color mixed with 1.5 or 3% oxidizer in the ratio of 1:2. The soak time is 15 to 20 minutes. The hair dye consolidation method is known as the bristled blend in professional literature. The bristled blend is a composition with an increased amount of colorant for double saturation of hair with pigments. It's used only for coloring of the unmanageable gray hair.
Its secret is that the colorant portion should be taken twice higher than the usual coloring procedure. As we use more colorant than for the usual mixture, it is recommended to take the 9% oxidizer instead of a 6 to make the bristled blend.
So, to prepare the bristled blend, we should use the following. For the medium rigid hair, we take 1.5 part of the natural scale colorant and 1 part of the oxidizer. For the strong rigid hair, we take 2 parts of the natural scale colorant and 1 part of the 9% oxidizer. The fourth case, original color, natural base is 7.0, cosmetic base is 5.14, grayness is 80%, very hard to cover, desired color 5.14. Let's create the coloring cocktail. We apply the 5.14 colorant with the 9% oxidizer to the hair roots in 2:1 proportion, following the mixing rules of the bristled blend for the hard to cover grayness. The soak time is 40 minutes. Then we dye the hair over the entire length using the 5.14 color with a 3% oxidizer in the ratio of 1:1 or 1:1.5 and keep it for 30 minutes.
Method 4. Loosening of the scaly layer, the cuticle. Loosening of the cuticle helps the colorant lay down more uniformly and stay longer. There are 2 techniques of cuticle loosening, the classical one and more up-to-date, the mordonsage.
The classical technique of cuticle loosening. The composition of the recipe: 10 grams of shampoo, 10 grams of oxidizer, 50 grams of water. The concentration of the oxidizer depends on the rigidity level of gray hair. For very hard Asian hair, you will need 12% oxidizer. For European rigid hair, you will have to take 9% oxidizer, and for European hair of medium rigidity, it is recommended to use 6% oxidizer.
The composition has a pretty liquid consistency, and therefore it's recommended to apply it with a sponge. The soak time is from 10 to 20 minutes. Afterwards, the composition is washed away, and you can start coloring into a selected shade without using extra caring materials.
Mordensage is a more up-to-date simplified technique of cuticle loosening, used for better penetration of the colorant into the hair cortex. To perform the mordensage, we have to use 3 or 6% oxidizer in its pure form. For long natural hair, it's recommended to use 3% oxidizer, and for vitreous grayness, 6% oxidizer.
Generally, the procedure can be performed as follows. You should apply the oxidant in its pure form along all the hair or to separate areas. Leave this for 10 minutes to effect. Then you should dry the hair with a dryer and proceed to further coloring without washing the oxidizer away.
Let's consider an example. We should apply the 6% oxidizer in its pure form to gray patches of hair and leave it for 10 minutes. After that, we need to pull this off using the disposable towel, dry our hair with a dryer, and proceed to coloring. Then, we apply the desired 5.14 color with a 6% oxidizer to the hair roots in the ratio of 1:1 or 1:1.5. The soak time makes up 40 minutes. The entire length is toned using the 5.14 colorant mixed with 1.5 or 3% oxidizer in the ratio of 1:2. The soak time is 15 to 20 minutes.
We have demonstrated the 4 methods that can help you get 100% gray coverage results quite easily and accurately. All these methods are good and productive, so the choice is yours.
The topic of our next tutorial is the blonde, so keep in touch, put likes, and subscribe to our channel. See you!